At this point, I think it's safe to say that I'm fast becoming a reaction channel. So you may or may not have heard that today, the UK's had a budget.
You're joking. I fucking love budgets.
Well, I mean, technically it's an autumn statement, but I still don't think you're going to like this one, mate. As Jez has gone on the hunt for money, 50 billion to be precise, and this budget by many is being billed as the return to austerity. But I'm pretty sure the Conservatives are going to want to avoid that label. In today's video, we're just going to react to what's gone on today. I'm going to list out the major tax changes and how they're going to impact your finances going forwards. And then I'm going to drop another video on Sunday where we look at how the markets reacted to this, as well as the OBR report that accompanies the statement and what it's likely to do to the UK economy long term, including our spending power and prospects. I want to dissect all of that properly for you and don't just want to speedily react to it.
There's no way this is real.
So yeah, you can all look forward to that on Sunday. I'm sure that'll be the highlight of your weekend. Right, timestamps below for you for people that want to skip to the key sections that affect them. And let's just get on with it, shall we?
Well, we're all going to be paying a bit more tax, I'm afraid.
Let's just get started with the one that we're going to feel the most, income tax. At the last general election, the Conservative Party promised not to raise tax rates. And if you watch the statement from Hunt, he's very careful not to say the words tax rise. But we all know that promises are cheap in politics. And while there might not be specifically tax rises per se, what they've done here is drag loads of people into paying higher taxes from April by doing something called fiscal drag. A lot of you will have heard of this referred to as stealth tax. It's like promising not to punch you in the face, but then they give you a kick in the leg instead. First of all, though, there's nothing stealth about what they've done to the additional rate of tax. This is that higher end rate of tax where you pay 45% on anything you earn above 150k a year. This is going to be dropped to £125,140 a year from April. This means an extra 250,000 people will now fall into that 45% tax rate. If you earn 150k a year at the minute, from April you'll pay an extra £1,200 in tax. What's crazy about this is the complete U-turn since Kwarteng and Liz Truss. This was the tax they were going to get rid of, remember? And now we're making more people pay it, not less. It just shows the absolute pivot that we've had in just a few short weeks from the ill-fated, mini budget, as they called it. But it isn't just the higher earners that have been punished here. The stealth tax really applies to all earners, and I'll show you what I mean now. The annual rate of growth in income in the UK in the last 12 months has been 6%. That's one of the biggest average pay rises this country's ever had, and while that might sound great on paper, the rate of inflation at the minute is 11%. So even though your wages have gone up, you're still poorer. But the government have gone a step further by freezing all of the tax bands until 2028. So as people's wages are rising, that means more people enter into these higher tax bands and then they end up paying more tax. So at each level of the tax system, they've frozen the allowances. And what that means is, as people receive pay rises of 6% on average, more people are pushed into higher rate tax brackets. Now, you're sat there going, I've had a 6% pay rise, but inflation is 11%, meaning in real terms, I'm 5% off where I need to be just to maintain my spending power. As well as that now, that pay rise is getting taxed at a higher rate than I was before. The next thing I want to look at is pensions.
It's estimated more than 2 million pensioners are living in poverty.
So there's some good news here for pensioners and for the future value of your state pension when you finally get there. The government has committed to upholding the triple lock. This is the government's promise to raise state pension by one of three amounts.
1, the growth in average wages. 2, the rate of inflation. Or 3, 2.5%, whichever is the largest.
As we just discussed, average wage growth is 6%, so inflation at 11% is clearly the highest of those three figures. You might remember a clip that I've used in previous videos about raising pensions in line with inflation. It goes like this.
It would be absurd to raise the state pension by 8%.
So absurd, or absurd as the guy likes to say, is the vibe we're going for here. And we're raising pensions in line with inflation. It's kind of needed though. Around 16 to 20% of all pensioners in the UK live in poverty. And obviously inflation makes that worse. Most of them rely on state pension and pension credits as their only form of income. So by rising this in line with inflation, you're just stopping those people from slipping further into poverty. I believe the extra amount that they're going to get is around £870 a year, something like that. They're also increasing the pension credits I just mentioned by 10.1% as well. Now, with regards to private pensions, so your company pension and any SIPs or anything like that, many were expecting them to freeze the lifetime savings allowance. If I have missed that, I'm sorry, and that would be another stealth tax if it does come into place. Essentially, it's a tax on the total amount that you can withdraw from a pension over its lifetime. So if you exceed that amount, you get taxed quite aggressively on anything over. Now, it's over £1 million, the allowance, and many people will say, well, that's shed loads of cash. But actually, £1 million in pensions will produce a sustainable income of about £30,000 to £40,000 a year. which is a good retirement income. But the reality is, for most people watching this, anyone under the age of 45, which is my main audience, especially those of you under 30, you're going to need to have a lot of money at retirement age in order to sustain your quality of life. If we adjust that £30,000 for inflation for 30 years, so let's say that's 55k a year of spending power to equate to 30k now, you're going to need well over £1 million in pensions in order to produce that level of income sustainably. So while it might sound like a high figure, over £1 million, by capping this and not uplifting it in line with inflation, you are punishing a lot of people. One example is doctors. A lot of doctors retire early or just stop working because essentially their pension benefits mean that they will exceed this. So they see it as there's not much point in them working anymore when they could just retire and not be penalised heavily from a tax perspective by putting more money into their pensions. Again, I've not seen anything on this. If I have missed it, I'm sorry. Let's now look at changes that affect investors. It could be argued that the changes here are the most aggressive. Capital gains tax, which is tax on profits that you make from investments outside of taxed advantage accounts like ISAs and pensions and things like that, have been chopped aggressively. So at the moment, you can lock in £12,300 a year of capital gains tax-free. So that means if you have an asset that increases in value, you can crystallise and lock in £12,300 of those gains tax-free every single year. From next year, that goes to 6,000. And then from the year after that, that goes to 3,000. It appears that there's still going to be taxed at the rates of 10 and 20% based on your income tax code. So if you're a lower rate taxpayer, you pay 10% capital gains. If you're a higher rate, you pay 20%. So it's still quite a favourable tax overall. But yeah, they've aggressively sliced the allowance. This is bad news for a lot of investors in assets outside of tax advantage accounts. For example, anyone with gains in crypto is going to feel this. For everyone watching who uses a stocks and shares, I remember any gains that you make inside of that ISA are completely sheltered from tax. That includes capital gains tax. As well as that, it also includes dividends, which have also been targeted from these tax reforms. Currently, you get £2,000 a year of tax-free dividends. So this tax-free allowance is good for anyone who has investments outside of a tax advantage account like an ISA, but it's also good for company directors like myself. So I run this business, this one now that I'm talking to you, through a limited company. And at the moment, I can take £2,000 a year of tax-free dividends from that business. That's going to be reduced to £1,000 and then £500 by 2024, April. Sucks to be me, but this really is just a reminder for investors to, use your ISA allowances, use your pensions, use these tax advantaged accounts that allow you to grow your money tax-free. I mean, your pensions, you will be taxed when you take it out, but it shelters you from these capital gains tax and dividends tax. Let's talk about support for family and energy bills.
The debit they were asking for, the standing order was extortionate.
From April, the price guarantee on energy will rise from £2,500 to £3,000 and then sit at that level for 12 months. So the good news is there's still going to be support for energy, but there's going to be less support for energy. Jeremy Hunt said when he was doing the statement that this would equate to about £500 worth of support for every household in the UK. There's also going to be means tested support, so further additional support for the lowest income earners in the UK to help them with their energy bills. Support for pensioners as well and anyone with disability. Also, the national living wage will rise by 9.7%, meaning 2 million people will get a pay rise. And anyone who lives in rented social accommodation, your rent rise will be capped at 7% instead of the 11% that it was previously capped at. Okay, now let's talk about council tax.
Is a likely increase now in council tax.
I didn't hear Jez mention this in the statement, but it's certainly in the report that accompanies it. So before this, on an annual basis, your council tax bill could only go up by 2.99% unless there was a referendum held in the local area where everyone could vote on whether they felt it was, a necessary rise. But after today's changes from April, your local council will be able to raise your council tax bill by up to 5% without holding a referendum. So you can bet they're going to raise it by that 5%. And that's actually quite a significant bill when you think about it. It's £5 for every 100 you already pay, and that's on a monthly basis as well. I know some people pay 10 months, some people pay 12, but still, there's going to be a significant increase in your council tax bill on an annual basis. Some other key things that we need to discuss. They're increasing the levy on energy company profits from 25% to 35%, and they're also introducing a levy on electric generators of 45% on profits from January. Jeremy said this will raise $14 billion next year. I'm sure many of you will be glad to see these levies raised on these companies, but the question will still persist, why is it not more when it's such an easy way to raise money and, the burden needs to be shared equally? But a 10% raise is significant on the company profits, but yeah, I still think people are going to say, well, it should be more than that. There's also some interesting remarks on energy in general. They basically said that the energy crisis that we're going through at the minute has resulted in the UK paying an extra 150 billion a year for energy this year. That's the whole of the NHS, just extra that we literally burnt, on energy costs. I really hope that the governments now take this as inspiration to move this country towards greener, sustainable energy. We need to be self-sufficient with energy. Energy is money, energy is value. We can see that now. And we can't be held to ransom by other countries because of our reliance on fossil fuels. Speaking of efficiency, electric car drivers are to pay road tax from April 2025. I do think it's good that there are incentives in place to encourage people to buy electric cars, but I highly doubt that someone's going to go, oh, I'm not buying an electric car because there's a £25 a year road tax charge on it. You can't help but feel that this would have been an easier place to raise some extra cash and to just introduce road tax immediately for electric cars. I mean, I drive a dirty diesel, so you're probably all going to hate me, all you electric car owners, and be like, oh no, we should get benefits. But just my 2 pence on the matter. I think a person who drives a Tesla is still going to drive a Tesla even if there was a 25 quid charge on there, and it might have been an easier way to raise some money. So in conclusion, the main themes to take away from this are that the majority of people are going to end up paying more tax, but not through tax rises, but by being pushed into higher tax bands and by the tax allowances not rising in line with inflation, which is a drag tax on us all. As well as that, we can expect higher council tax bills and the support for energy to reduce from April, meaning that everyone's energy bills are probably going to increase from then. I've linked the annual statement below for you so you can have a look at it if you want. Just go to page 53 and it outlines all of the changes from there so you can have a read. So on face value from April, we're all going to be a bit poorer as a result of this. But one big question that hangs over this is, will all these changes even come into place? Some of these changes are being staged in over years, and there is a general election in 2 years. As we already said, promises in politics are cheap, and it wouldn't surprise me one little bit if as we approach the election, they wind a load of this back, in order to get voters on side. Many might say that this really is just an attempt to show global markets and world economies that the UK is serious about getting on top of its finances after the disaster that was the mini-budget. The big question is now then, how will markets react? And what does the outlook look like for the UK going forwards in terms of economic growth, unemployment, and all those key metrics that really shape how our lives are going forwards? We're going to look at that on Sunday, and I really look forward to sitting down with you then. Thank you.